We have a topic today which is about the customer experience and the customer journey which you are creating for your experiences. And with me we have two guests. So pleasure having you here. First of all, we have Jürgen here, who is the general manager of the Association of German Amusement Parks and Leisure Companies. So representing like many of the biggest attractions which we have in the German market. Welcome, Jürgen. Great having you here.
Thank you for having me. Thanks a lot.
And our second guest is Chris, who is product manager at GoCity, and as product manager will be able to tell us a lot of insights on connectivity, but also just how does a product person look at the customer journey. So welcome, Chris.
Thank you very much. Excited to be here.
Great having you. The way I wanted to start is basically to share a bit how does the customer journey in general look like in our field of tourism. And usually there you will have 5 stages that someone is going through. The first stage, this part we already had. The first stage is the dreaming phase. Then there is the phase of planning someone goes into. Then there is the booking, then the actual experience happening, and then the sharing. More concretely, what does it mean? How does this look like in our industry? So let's say, for example, someone heard from friends or saw on social media that there is a great experience, a great destination they would love to go to. Then after this dreaming phase, which can go via different social media, could also go via word of mouth, for example, they go into planning phase. So they actually type into Google or their favorite source of knowledge what they could do there. They explore which options they have, when they would like to go there, and so on. So typically Google is a very important channel here, but also OTAs like Get Your Guide, like To Amusement, like GoCity possibly. People are looking into and just plan what they would love to do. And then they go into the booking stage. So they know what to do, they know what they want to experience, they want to have a smooth booking process then. And after that, a couple of days or weeks later, they go into the experiences phase. So they're actually on site, they have a great experience. Also they interact with all the on-site options which are there. So maybe there is a scanning happening, maybe there's a turnstile system and so on. That all belongs to the experiences phase here. And after that, hopefully positively, they will share their experience, they will post it on social media, they will maybe create a review on TripAdvisor, on Google, which then again triggers this process, and someone else, either someone who they know or just who finds it in the internet, gets into the dreaming phase and gets motivated to also do something similar. So that's the touristic customer journey. And basically what we want to ensure is, or what you as businesses in this field want to ensure is that this whole customer journey works very flawlessly together. And one of the key questions which I get is, okay, is there one system that solves it all? One system that does all in one, all of these stages? And when you think about all the players, all of the steps that we just talked about, from Google, OTAs, to the booking, to the on-site operations, to sharing, to social media, and so on, one thing I think becomes apparent, and there is not one company that does all of that. However, you want to make sure that your experience which you are providing to your customers is flawless. So what is the critical thing? The way I see it is that you have to have a system that is basically connecting everything. So not an all-in-one system, but an all connected in one system, not all coming from a company, but one that works with all companies which are important here on your customer journey. How we at BookingKit are doing it is by having just a lot of relationships with any kind of player that you could imagine in that field. So all kinds of online resellers, all kinds of offline resellers, like also hotels and so on, which might help you to get guests attracted to your business. Plus, we have connections with many also operational software, hardware systems like POS, entry management, accounting systems, and so on, which just all are important so that you can provide this very seamless experience to your end customer. So that's something we are very much passionate about as a topic. Yeah, so here just as an example, how this could look like with some logos that you might be aware of. We as the booking part, it doesn't make sense to us to just do the booking, but then everything else is not really connected and not working on site. If you want to enable your customers to have a great customer experience, make sure that all of these systems are communicating and working well together so that you can exactly do this here. You ensure a frictionless customer journey for your end customers from dreaming phase via experiencing phase up to the last phase of sharing how great their experience was. So that's how we see the topic in general of creating a great customer journey. And with that as an intro, I give the word to Jürgen to share his perspective from the just amusement parks and leisure companies he's representing.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you for handing over. Thank you for the introduction. So I love to give you a brief overview about the entertainment industry, as you said, about amusement parks, but also other leisure attractions, and what digitalization made out of the business, how it became an essential part of our industry over the years. So looking back to the beginnings of VDFU, to our association, we were established in 1978, and initially only for amusement parks, means outdoor with a roller coaster and Ferris wheel, what probably all of us is coming to our mind first when we think about amusement park. Nowadays, we grew over the years, not only in terms of member companies only, but also in terms of member types. It's not only the traditional amusement park or the commercial amusement parks, it's furthermore zoos or fun bath, indoor attractions, brandlands, and many others. So this is how the industry developed in the German-speaking market. And this is where, of course, also the story starts when it comes to digitalization. So in the early beginning, again, we were established in 1978. In the early beginning, it was very simple to operate an amusement park. It was just come by whenever you want. The cashier desk is open anytime, in summer season at least. Pay cash preferred, of course. There have not been any alternatives. And then have fun and leave. That's pretty much it. Also, the F&B facilities inside an amusement park were not necessarily operated by the park operator itself. Mostly it was run by, it was outsourced and ran by third parties. So it was very simple. So at this stage, it's pretty hard to talk about customer journey, of course. It was rather more limited to the visit as such. But of course, this was back in the early days. In the meanwhile, the industry saw an evolution. So there was not only an amusement park anymore. It became more and more even that amusement parks also offered F&B services, restaurants and other food outlets. Or they involved, of course, other shows came up, theaters came up, or completely different types of new attractions popped up, such as trampoline parks, or guided tours, or VR experiences. So I don't have to tell you guys, you all are part of the industry, about the big variety of leisure and entertainment attractions raising over the years. Many, such as VR experiences or trampoline parks, nobody had in mind some 10, 20 years ago. But this is how the leisure, how the entertainment industry evoluted over the decades. And for the first time, when it was very simple in the early beginning for amusement parks, but in the first time, there were some players who had to question themselves, who do we want to approach, when and where? And this was the starting point of getting more difficult. Because at the same time, not only the industry passed a process with new kinds of attractions coming up, also the amusement parks themselves, they modified in a way. They went through a transition and became multi-attraction places. And traditional amusement parks were pretty much simple, limited to the rides. But nowadays it's much more about the experience, of course, including food and beverage, of course, including retail shops for merchandising and offering shows to different visitor groups, or also indoor attractions for bad weather alternatives or combined VR experiences. So it's more or less a one-stop shop for different kinds of amusement, different kinds of entertainment for the visitors. And at this point, also amusement parks had to question themselves, who do we want to address, when and where exactly? And then out of the sudden, after the evolution, which was rather more a process over the year, a revolution took place. And we all know what the corona pandemics did to all our industries. So it also affected the leisure industry in Germany, or Germany-speaking Europe, very heavily. So it was a strong impact. So at the very first time, overnight, amusement parks had to limitate the visitor numbers. Before that, everyone was welcome, just get in. They had to provide, they were forced by governmental regulations, they had to provide the first time a digital booking tool for online booking. Means, of course, to ensure that only a limited number of visitors is in the attraction at the same time, they had to sell time slots, or they had to limit the number of visitors and the maximum number of visitors by doing so. And also some cashier desks had to be closed in some of the German states. So online ticketing only was the only way to sell tickets at all. So again, overnight, all amusement parks were simply forced to switch to an online ticketing, which was not really common before that. But of course, despite nobody really wanted to be forced to invent it from one day to the other, some positive side effects popped up. With online ticketing, it was the first time the industry realized, oh, there's a prepayment process, and it has an effect. It has an impact to my cash flow. It was a way easier staff planning. An operator of a bigger amusement park in Germany told me, well, before Corona crisis, I did my staff planning just related to the weather forecast. If they say the sun is shining, I had to increase my staff numbers. But now I really know how many people will show up, or at least I will get a good picture about the future. It's a more even load. The operators realized, okay, once somebody holds a ticket, he's not so picky with the weather anymore. So before the online ticketing, when the weather was bad, plans changed, and the customer said, okay, initially we wanted to go to the amusement park today, but it's lousy outside, so we better do something else indoor. But now, once they have the ticket, the prepaid ticket, they say, well, it's not my favorite weather, but we got the tickets anyway, so we have to go, which provides a more even load to the park operators. And at the first time, there was an acknowledgement of yield management, because for as I said, in the early beginnings of amusement parks, everyone was welcome. Just get in. One price fits all. Just get in. But now they were forced to limit the number of visitors. And for the first time, amusement parks had to think about, okay, how to make the most money out of this limited number of visitors. And they also realized the importance of guest convenience, of guest satisfaction. If you have been to an amusement park and it's crowded like hell and you queue up for every single ride forever, of course you do not have time to spend any money for food and beverage. Yeah, or you will hardly queue for another 10 minutes just to get an ice cream. And this is what many amusement parks realized in Germany during the Corona crisis, that visitors tend to spend more the less crowded it is, and they leave with a better satisfaction. And it's not necessarily a matter of the entrance fee. So they're quite, they're not so sensitive when it comes to the amount of money they recognize and they reward somehow if there's a smooth experience without too much waiting time. And so this was just the door opener for a bunch of new opportunities we have for our industries. And some of our member companies are eagerly working on making this or that possible. It's like selling tickets at short notice for people with a home address nearby the attraction. Once you have their contact details, you can attract them by short notice messages and special offers for spending just the afternoon only, for instance. Or also, of course, yield management plays a very important role today and will become even more important in the future, linking the price of the entry fees to school holidays or to public holidays or to the weather forecast again. This really makes the difference when it comes to getting the most out of it. Or also in the planning, letting your customers know, oh, you just booked your ticket for the amusement park. Did you realize that one of your Facebook friends will also be there at the same time? Just meet there. Or also even upon arrival. We have techniques in the market saying, okay, you have just entered the amusement park. Weather forecast, well, it's going to, it will start raining in about 10 minutes. You get a push notification on your mobile, on your smartphone saying, well, you can buy an umbrella in the very next shop on the left, just also to increase in-park purchases, of course. You can pre-reserve, pre-sign rides to avoid queuing, or, of course, place at a restaurant. Queue management as such, of course, or you can also start selling fast lane tickets in order to reduce waiting time for your visitors, but also, of course, to increase your income, your revenue. And you can also measure when the visitors are streaming where they're going, at what time, and change food outlets, for instance. In the morning, you sell coffee and donuts at the same food outlet, and in the afternoon, you sell things that the kids can easily eat and drink back on the way home. So using the same shop in two different ways, of course, but also after the experience, after the visit, it's first time to reach out to the visitors even after they left the attraction. It's by sharing, by making it possible through social media to share their experiences, but also when it comes to recruiting. And recruiting or lack of staff is one of the most critical threats of the industry. But now you have the chance to check, okay, where's the home address by the zip code, for instance. Where's the home address of the visitor? Is he or she living more or less nearby, let's say within a 30-kilometer range, because this is the max people tend to commute for work. And if your guest is leaving your park, had a great day, hopefully, and is living within this 30-kilometer distance, why don't you send out a push notice saying, well, you enjoyed the stay here with us. Why don't you come on a daily basis? Just work with us, have fun. Are you interested in working with us? Just saying yes, no, make it very, very low key for the user to push a yes button, for instance, and the next day or the day after, he or she gets a call or message by your recruiting team. So this is just to share some ideas, some visions our members have, and they're working on to make and take the best out of all the bunch of opportunities yield management, digitalization provides to the industry. So that's it pretty much from my end.
Yeah, inspiring thoughts and on the opportunities which we have ahead. Thanks for that, Jürgen. I already see one or two questions which came up, and maybe we can immediately also include them. So one question was from these factors which you just talked about, how do you connect these? How do you make sure they are I don't know what exactly the idea was, like all connected, all in one system, I guess?
Well, it's pretty hard for me to answer this question as I'm with the association. So of course, on an operational basis, this is handled by the individual attractions, and the attractions are very different, as I initially said. So it makes it different if you're running an amusement park or a zoo or a fun bath or whatever. And the same variety you will find when it comes to the IT infrastructure. So there will not be the one and only answer, I have to admit.
Yep, makes sense. And one question, so there are many opportunities, many positive side effects from the changes that also the pandemic has induced. What would you say from a customer perspective, from the customer journey? Which world was better? Which world had a better customer journey? The one before the pandemic, or like the one we're living in now that went through all of that change?
Now, by far, of course, by now, because now it's the first time that the operators try to create products or communication channels meeting the needs of the visitor to a higher degree than it was in the past. So in the past, again, it was more, well, I open my park on a daily basis and you're welcome. Yeah? Period. And now, of course, it's to higher level of information. It's a higher level of guest satisfaction, and again, amusement park operators realize that it makes a difference if a guest is happy or not, if he's satisfied or not, and it's not necessarily, and this was one of the key learnings, it's not necessarily that you earn less money if you welcome less guests. You can also have less guests making the same money and having happier guests at the end.
All right. Thank you very much.
Welcome.
And with that, I would lead over to Chris and the GoCity part.
Hello. I'm assuming everyone can still hear me okay? Microphone working?
Works perfectly.
Excellent. Okay. I mean, interestingly, Karina, one of your questions about how do we connect these factors is actually going to be something I somewhat touch upon actually in my talk. For me, it's interesting being here as a product manager. My perspective is very specific on this question that we're asking and about the perfect customer journey. So I've spent a lot of time in events, in attraction ticketing, and now at GoCity. So I've spent a lot of my time thinking about how do you connect a digital experience and a physical experience in both directions, and how do those feed into each other. As a product manager, if you're not familiar with the kind of the role, we exist in this space that ties together the technology, the user experience, or the user need, and the business. How can we actually make a sustainable business decision on that? We exist right in that center. And what that means, practically speaking, is we spend a lot of time asking the question, which problem are we actually trying to solve here? We get a lot of people say, oh, it'd be great if we had this feature. And we will often respond with, that's interesting, but which problem is that solving? What problem are we trying to solve there? And so when I was thinking about this, that brought me back to this question of what makes an unforgettable experience. That's what we're trying to explore here. Now, there are a number of things that you could bring into your physical experience. Absolutely. So if it's an attraction specifically, you could be thinking about how do we make sure there's kind of a really wow factor in there that every customer need is catered to. Obviously at GoCity, we think about the individual destinations, the individual attractions, but we also think about the destination. So if you're visiting Berlin as a city, and I did a little exploration on this, and you look at the things that people talk about when they say a memorable experience or a perfect journey or an unforgettable experience. And a couple of things come up again and again. So they will talk about, great local food, connecting with local culture, connecting with the local people. They'll talk maybe about finding hidden gems in the destination. They'll talk about making great memories, finding some great photos, having time to just sit and really soak up the environment. But nobody talks about the technology. Like, the thing is, they don't say, I went to this destination so I could use this great app. That's oddly enough not the thing they're there for. And the key thing here is that your technology needs to blend into the background. It needs to be invisible fundamentally. And I'll come back to that a bit more. And I think what we need to make sure we're doing is thinking about how do we use technology to facilitate an experience, and which experience are we trying to facilitate, and kind of allow ourselves to make our product, whether that's a technology or an app or we're an aggregator. So thinking about operators, DMOs, OTAs, we need to be invisible, facilitating a wonderful experience for the physical experience. And that's something that we need to kind of come back to. So what this basically boils down to, as a product manager, I have this idea of we're not building features, we're trying to solve customer problems. So some of the great examples that came up earlier around, oh, it's raining, so someone might want to find themselves an umbrella, or it's the end of the day, we've got a long drive home, we want to try and find some food for the kids because they're going to get hangry if we don't give them something. So those are some nice examples, and I'll give a couple more kind of classic examples from my world, or examples that we use. But the key thing here is to explore the underlying need. So you cannot try and solve for every possible outcome. You have to understand and identify what the major need is of the customer and try and facilitate that. And I'll come along here. I'll talk a bit more about where we see that, where we can facilitate that through GoCity and how we tackle that kind of mindset. But it's more about how we are tackling the mindset. It's less about the specifics of what we do, if you see what I mean. So this is a classic example that I use a lot in product management when I'm talking about the feature versus the need. So someone goes to buy a drill. And again, one of the benefits of working from home is I can have props. So someone goes to buy a drill. They probably don't want to drill. They're probably trying to drill a hole. Like, if this is a 6mm drill bit, they're probably trying to drill a 6mm drill hole in the wall, but they don't want a hole in the wall. They want to hang a hook. They want to hang a hook so they can hang a picture. They want to hang a picture because they've got bare walls, and maybe they've got bare walls because they've just moved in. So you see, the underlying need is not they wanted a drill, they've just moved, or they have bare walls. So the way to solve this problem is possibly with these, which are sticky pads, or buying, paying for decorators. The key thing here is that at every point along this journey, there's an opportunity to create a wonderful experience for the customer. So you could be a phenomenal decorator, you could build a better tool that doesn't destroy the walls, or you could build a great drill. But these are all different ways to create a great experience. Now, in travel, I had a couple of thoughts about what this might look like. So let's take that whole journey from the dreaming down. You might say, okay, I'm going to set up some flight alerts. First thing we can ask, why are you setting up flight alerts? Well, I can't find a flight that I want, or maybe I'm just looking for ideas and trying to get inspired. For this example, I said, well, maybe they can't find a flight that they want. So why can't they find a flight that they want? Well, there's limited date. They've got limited dates they can travel on, or the flights they found are really expensive. They can't afford those. Okay, so why? Well, maybe they have a high pressure job, so they can't take a lot of time off. Or maybe they have a 0-hour contract, so they can't take time off. Or maybe they're traveling with a larger travel party. Maybe they've just got a new family, they've got kids, or they're going as a group of friends. They don't normally do that. So you can see how the flight alert is the means to the end. The underlying problem they're trying to solve is a couple of things away from that. And this is a technique we use a lot. It's not unique to product management, but it's called 5 whys. And the idea is, if you just keep asking why a few times, you'll often find yourself understanding the real underlying problem that you're trying to solve. So let's kind of build back up from this. Basically, your product should be invisible. And this is one of my I recommend doing a search for Superman cape green screen. You get the GIF behind this. This is a static image, but the GIF is absolutely worth digging up. It's brilliant. But the key thing is your customer shouldn't see what's happening behind the scenes. You shouldn't make them, make the booking, then get the code, punch the code in somewhere else to print the thing out, to get in. Like, all those sequences are introducing friction in the journey. They're introducing friction, and what that happens is, yes, they're remembering your experience, your part of the journey, but it's not in a favorable light. But if you can blend in and become invisible, that creates that wonderful journey for them. That's what they're going to come back for. So here's how that manifests at GoCity. So the first question to ask is like, well, okay, so what role do we play in this overarching journey that customers are trying to take, that people are taking when they're traveling? So we're a strategic connector. So for folks who aren't familiar with us, we work with attractions, and we kind of work to effectively create a pass that grants customers access into attractions. So you're going to go visit Berlin, for example. We might have worked with as many attractions as we could in Berlin to kind of gain access to your ticketing systems. And we would have a single pass, a single QR code, effectively, but it's a digital product that would grant seamless access into those attractions. So what we're doing is we're bringing additional travelers, additional visitors to those attractions, but we're also allowing the visitor, the tourist, to seamlessly access any attraction they want to see within the people we work with. So we're creating this great connection, this facilitation between both the customer and the attraction. Now, what that means is we're taking away a bit of friction, because suddenly the customer doesn't have to think about, well, where should I go next? Or do I have a ticket for that? Or do I have to book ahead for that? Although obviously we do enable people to book ahead, but we're taking away that friction, so that we found in previous years that we've helped about 79% of our customers to actually discover more attractions than they would have gone without our product, because we took the friction away of that decision. Similar data to this, we actually enabled them to visit more attractions than they would have, because we took that friction away from them. So the overall experience for the visitor, for the tourist, is they explored this destination. They really got more out of Berlin. They experienced more in Berlin than they would have done. And the attractions got more time from those visitors, more opportunities to sell them food, sell them merchandise, as we heard earlier. So everyone has this better experience all around, and it feels frictionless. Now, for us at GoCity, what this means is we're heavily investing at the moment in our technology to enable scaling. And by scaling, I mean our ability to quickly reach new attractions, reach new resellers and trade partners, but also rebuilding our infrastructure to enable us to innovate. Now, what I mean by that is, historically, you know, a lot of older products, you have what we call a monolith, a single monstrous piece of technology that's very, very slow to evolve, very slow to change. And we're very intentionally redesigning our technology to enable us to explore new features, try and capture new opportunities more quickly because we've modularized it differently. And it's a very intentional decision on our part because we see that's the way we can create the most value for everyone in this ecosystem, in this market. So specifically, to answer the question from earlier, for us, connectivity is the key thing that we're thinking about. Now, connectivity, I'll touch on this in a moment, is obviously the obvious way of connectivity is talking about connectivity to your wider ecosystem. So if we can create great connectivity with attractions, we can enable better connections, which means that customers can seamlessly enter that attraction, and we can get up to, really up-to-date data about availability and rates. Similarly, great connectivity with a trade reseller means that they always know what they can get from us. We're passing the best prices on to them, so they have a great experience with us. So there's that connectivity, and I'll talk a bit more about the power of that in a moment. But I'll also talk about internal connectivity, because again, quite often, if you're a larger organization or you've a smaller organization with lots of disparate tools, those tools don't necessarily talk to each other. Those systems don't talk to each other. So the customer calls you up, and you can help them, but maybe it takes a while because you've got to log into a different system, and it's an older system, so now it's slow and it takes a while, and the customer is feeling all of that friction. So by enabling better connectivity internally and externally, that whole experience gets better, gets frictionless for everyone involved. So I'm also going to talk a bit about how connectivity really will be key to unlocking future opportunities. So one example of that is the practical side. So if you can connect systems better, you can start to spot, you can make some of those intelligent recommendations based on the weather, based on the time of day. But the key thing is that connectivity also plugs you into your wider ecosystem so you can learn more. So the connectivity here is, as I said, it's about being able to remove friction from every level. But the key thing that I kind of also want to talk about is that it's about insight. So historically, if you don't have good connections with your wider ecosystem or within your infrastructure, information flows from one of those systems to another, but it does it in a very fragmented way. So, for example, the customer has to make an order, then grab the order number, then they have to manually go to somewhere else and do something and trigger something and get the email and press the button in the app, and then they've got to wait for a certain thing. And there's a whole very simple 72-step process they have to go through. If it's an internal system, similarly, one of your employees has to grab some data, go look it up in somewhere else, and that friction doesn't create longer wait times for anyone achieving anything, and also means that people will drop off in that journey, particularly customers. It means that you have no insight into what's happening between those two systems. So one of the key things that's really powerful is that better connectivity will grant you insight into what's happening in the wider ecosystem, because you're getting those real-time data updates from those systems. Now, again, which systems do you want that from? That's about your 5 whys and understanding what customers are trying to do and understanding their needs. So there's a combination of doing that work to understand the particular need in time, and then figuring out how do we connect that to gain insight into when something's happening, how it's happening. And the key thing is that those kinds of insights can drive innovation, because once you understand, for example, let's say you have better real-time data about when customers are making certain transactions and at which stores in your, in your attraction, in your theme park, if that's what you're running. With that kind of data, you can start with kind of insights, you can start to make some really intelligent choices about what time of day to put certain products in those locations. And that's just based off the insight. Now, that's just within your personal ecosystem. If you could connect to a wider ecosystem of partners who you're working with, you can start to build up real-time insights about how customers are interacting across this fragmented network, this fragmented ecosystem. And that's really, really powerful. That gives you a huge opportunity and a huge advantage when you're thinking about how can we create more value? How can we create the next delightful, unforgettable experience? And I'll talk a little bit about how GoCity thinks about that in a moment. Now, a practical example of how connectivity changes things. So this is a fairly standard example of where we have a tool, SimpleConnect. This is our very basic integration with an attraction. A customer arrives, they need to go and generate a physical ticket with that attraction. So they've got to go to a ticket booth, and they've got to do a bunch of things there where the pass has to be validated. the ticket needs to be printed out and generated, and that needs to be recorded in the attraction system so that they can invoice us effectively. Then the visitor has to go and queue for an indeterminate amount of time, depending on what they're doing. And then eventually, finally, they can go and enjoy the attraction. So some of this is a function of, as we heard earlier, more people, more money, bring in the crowds. We want those crowds in here. Fantastic. And some of that is being addressed by doing timed entry and doing, reservations. But we still have more people than we can, if it's, again, speaking specifically to theme parks or tours, we have more people than we can serve because it's a limited physical resource. So fine. But that creates this wonderful friction, which obviously this is why we all go to attractions. We love to queue. It's our favorite thing to do. I live in England. I'm not English, but I live in England, so I can attest. It is a favorite pastime of the British. They love their queues. But no one goes to an attraction to do this. This isn't why they are here. They're here to go and do something else. So we introduced this thing called Direct Connect. Now, what this does is, again, through connectivity, we can connect directly to the entrance system of an attraction so that the visitor can just scan our QR code, our pass, at their gate. And everything I talked about in terms of generating a scan, marking the entry in the attraction system so that you can correctly see who's in the park, all of that happens seamlessly behind the scenes. And the customer hasn't had to wait, they haven't had to queue, they can just walk straight in. So that is a truly delightful experience. And the key thing is we looked at the customer journey and we said, okay, well, how can we get that queue out of there? What can we do? Because for us as well, bearing in mind the customer isn't just the actual traveler, it's the attraction. So how can we remove friction from everyone's journey here and create a better experience? So this is one example of how connectivity creates a huge opportunity for us. And it creates a positioning advantage for us because now when we go and reach out to attraction, we're building integrations with major ticketing partners. We've connected with several major ticketing partners and there's several more coming online even as we speak. We can reach out to an attraction and say, this is something that we can give you. And that gives us an advantage in that conversation. So there is that element to it as well. So this is taken directly from our kind of connectivity handbook that we hand out. But the whole point is that our API, our connectivity can enable all of this for you and really creates a seamless experience, both for the operator and for the visitor. Now, I talked briefly about insights driving opportunity. Now, with this kind of real-time data that we're getting as people basically check into an attraction, I don't know if anyone here still remembers Foursquare from a while back, but we have something not dissimilar to that, where when you're in a destination, you're visiting Berlin, we can start to see information about where we can map out on average, we can anonymize the data and we can see, okay, what time of day do people tend to go to this particular theme park or this particular museum? What paths do people tend to take? Or they go on this tour, they visit this location, and they do this. So we have this really interesting insight, that really unique insight into how are people exploring the cities that we open up to them. And one of the things that we want to really excited about doing is understanding how can we use that, how can we leverage that to create more opportunities for our attractions. How can we use it to create better experiences for customers so they get a really delightful, memorable time using the GoCity product, the GoCity app, and that makes them want to check out the next city through us again because they've had this wonderful opportunity, this wonderful experience. So that's where I say that connectivity starts to unlock these opportunities, starts to unlock this insight into the wider journey, and that's really powerful. And as I said, kind of connectivity creates value externally and internally. So customer calls up your customer service team and they ask a question. Unfortunately, if your systems are fragmented or slow and they don't talk to each other very effectively, you're going to have this really long conversation, which does two things. One, your customer is now frustrated probably because it's taken them ages to get what they think is a straightforward answer to a simple question, potentially. But also it's used up a lot of your team's time because they've had to spend time on the phone with this customer, looking up the information, stringing together the bits of information they need to come up with an answer. Now, if you can invest in improving that connectivity or find tools that naturally are better connected, what happens is two things. Your customer has a better experience because they call up and they get the answer they need immediately. Or maybe they don't even need to call up because the information was at their fingertips via some other means. But also your team gets time back, which they can spend in some way that's more valuable, creating more value for customers, unlocking more opportunities. So this idea of connecting the different parts of the journey was really, really critical. So to kind of wrap it all up together quickly, so product mindset on this. First thing to do is just ruthlessly remove friction at every turn that you can. So for the customer, they are not traveling so they can use anyone's particular product. They're traveling because they want to create memories, because they want to spend time with their friends or their family or their loved ones. So we need to make sure their experience appears as technology free as possible. We need to fade into the background and just enable those memories. That's how we create that unforgettable experience. We need to remember that features and cool ideas and any cool idea like that, those are interesting, but they're not valuable in and of themselves. They are delivery mechanisms for the customer experience. So we need to make sure that if we, have an app that goes with our theme park that we love, fantastic, but we need to remember the app is not valuable in and of itself. It is, what does that deliver? What value does that create for the customer that allows them to solve their problem? That's the key thing to anchor onto. And really start thinking about the connections between your systems and your partner systems. And remember that the key thing is just, I was thinking ahead one slide. The key is to basically create that memorable experience, basically connect that journey. So whether it's the 5 points from dreaming through to experience, or whether it's just when they arrive at your destination, make sure you're basically removing all that friction and think about what can you do to make that as easy as possible. I've got a few things for you to try back in the office, either tomorrow or next week. I would advise look for any point of technical or experiential friction that you know about. So whether it's a technical piece of friction that you know about, where connecting this system to that system internally or externally is incredibly painful, or where you talk to customers and hear them consistently mention this point of pain, this little bit of friction where it's difficult to get from this stage to that stage. Look at those and ask yourself, what could be true if that friction vanished? Like, what would that experience be like? And if you knew what was happening between those 2 points of friction, that touch point, if you understood what was happening there in real time, what could be true for your customers and for you? And if that sounds valuable, that's where you can start exploring, okay, how do we make that happen? I'd advise everyone to start asking the 5 whys. It's an incredibly, sounds like a very simple tool. It's an incredibly powerful tool. It leads to really valuable conversations. As you saw earlier, you start with one thing and very quickly the landscape broadens and you start to actually get a much richer understanding of what's actually happening, what problems actually exist, and which problems are the most valuable ones to solve. So I definitely advise using that, particularly talking to customers. And if any of that sounds particularly interesting or exciting, I would recommend you could look up, there's a framework called Jobs to be Done, which is a slightly more sophisticated version of the 5 whys. It basically says that everyone has a job they're trying to achieve, and that's what you're trying to help them serve. It's called Jobs to be Done, JTBD. Give that a search. You'll find a lot of excellent material about that. And I think that's me wrapping up. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks a lot, Chris. A lot of content. Also, I love how you made it actionable. On this slide we just looked at, I think that's important. So everyone gets their takeaways. What can I do practically with all of these insights that I just got from the session? So that's really awesome. Thanks very much. We have 2 or 3 questions here. Let's try to still squeeze them into our session. One is from Olivia. In your experience, which part of the customer journey is usually the hardest to improve and optimize? And do you see any quick wins which are often overlooked?
I think discovery is a very tricky one because there's so much information out there. So what you often find is people will start searching for something, and holding on to someone's attention is very, very difficult. So marketing and that marketing funnel, that top end of the funnel, is often particularly hard to optimize, mainly because it's opaque and it's very difficult to understand what's happening. I think the main way to kind of achieve that, I would find, is look at people who have found you and find opportunities to reach out to them and speak to them and ask some questions about how they found you, what they were looking for. And if you do that enough, you typically find you start to see patterns emerging, and that starts to tell you, where are people looking for us? What are they looking for when they find us? So those kinds of conversations are really powerful. That's probably one of the hardest ones I've found. It's difficult because it's opaque, but once you have an anchor there, then there's lots of things you can start to do with SEO, with content, with paid paid search to kind of help you get there. At the experiential level, if people are in destination, the tricky thing to understand there is obviously everyone has their own journey. Everyone's there to see something. Everyone's got a particular reason why they came to you. The complexity is digging down deep enough to understand why did they, if you're a particular attraction, why did they choose you? Like, what was it about your attraction that actually really liked? And then trying to understand, how do you optimize that message? How do you optimize that journey? Without more context, that's probably the best I can come up with. A lot of what I do is fairly, for me at least, quite easy to optimize, because it's very much about those technical connections. But again, my details are on the screen. By all means, reach out to me. Very, very happy to talk and kind of help soundboard some of that stuff with you.
Yep, that's great. That's great. Well, one thing we are seeing is like that oftentimes there is a gap between the booking and the experiencing. So especially when operators are not using modern tech, then oftentimes like the end customer is buying a ticket on Get Your Guide, Viator, for example. Yes. Go to the venue, they have this ticket, and they think obviously it can be scanned there, but it can't. But first they have to swap it to like a ticket they can also verify on site. So stuff like that, I think, is very common still in our industry, but also like solved by many companies for this step.
I think the one thing to add to that is there's that experience, there's that jump from digital to physical, and exactly as I said in my example, like we're trying to solve that with our particular solution. But as you said, there's lots out there. But as I touched on earlier, it's a very fragmented market. So where someone has bought access to your attraction, or where that purchase happens, is there's a lot out there, and not every channel is as able to lean into better connectivity as each other. And so that's sometimes difficult, where you might be ready to help them. You might be wanting this connection, and they're not in a place where they can work with you. They're not either technically sophisticated enough, or they haven't advanced their own tech stack to that point, or they just don't have the resources yet. So it takes a while. So there's that bit of, some of these things take a while. And that is a frustration, because there's not a lot you can do in that environment, but either wait or find the channels and the partners who you can work with in that way.
Makes sense. Last question I will put up. There is like a couple of questions that go into that direction. How can I work with GoCity? How can I sign up? One that is like, when will you have the first destinations in the German market? Can you share a bit on that, how people can get in touch?
I would say I'm definitely not the person to speak to that particular part of the GoCity journey specifically. But I would be very, very happy to put anyone in touch who's interested. If you drop me an email, reach out to me, I can connect you with my colleagues. Alexandra, who may actually be in the room virtually, I'm not sure. But by all means, reach out to me, and I'll be very happy to connect you. I don't specifically know. I know, for example, that we're doing a lot of work to reach German visitors, German tourists. I'm not entirely sure off the top of my head what our plans are about German destinations, and about what the best way is for someone to reach out to us, but I would absolutely be able to connect you with someone who can help.
All right. So make use of the data that you just see in front of you.
Please do.
To get in touch. Great. Chris and also Jürgen, thank you very much for your input. We are going now into a 6-minute break, I believe. And then we have the next session upcoming, which is with Google. Olga from Google was already just here for a second with her video. And basically, we're looking at how is Google transforming the tours, activities, and attractions industry, and what happened since our ExperiencesConnect last year, where we already had Google on board. And one disclaimer, a lot has happened. So stay tuned and see you in a bit.